All right, guys, get ready for a long, hot, violent, bloody summer all around the world, and it's about to kick off possibly in the next few hours, according to the Russian governor of Zaporozhye. They are currently evacuating a sizable part of their population, claiming that the Ukrainians are currently testing their defenses. They've been increasing their bombardments, mobilizing troops in and around the border. Lots of troop movements right now. It could start any hour. The long-anticipated counter-offensive that might be the kickoff point of World War III for reasons that we are going to discuss today. As you can see behind me here, Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, is inspecting what appears to be thousands, well, maybe hundreds is a better assessment of what's here anyways. I'm sure they don't have all their stuff in one spot, but at least in this one location, hundreds of brand new T-90 tanks. They can build 1,600 of these a year. And I believe when they started this war, they had something like 30,000 tanks of all shapes, sizes, dates, etc. So these people who are saying that the Russians are running out of weapons, it's completely untrue. Okay, the Wagner Group has been doing the majority of the fighting. And yes, we're going to talk about the Wagner freakout in just a minute. But they're talking that Putin might have a big surprise up his sleeve, especially after what happened with the Kremlin. We're talking about 900 warplanes, 150 bombers, just doing a massive blitzkrieg leveling of any part of Ukraine they decide to finally take and conquer. So we're going to see what happens. This is what the Russians have been doing behind the scenes. They've been preparing for this long-anticipated counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are only going to succeed at if they can really just go in and hit them hard and fast, blitzkrieg style, which is ironic that they'll be using Leopard 2 tanks, which makes this situation all the more concerning for reasons any historian should be aware. Now, Prigozhin, the Wagner guy, let's talk about the freakout, okay? We're going to take you all around the map today. We got a lot of stuff to talk about here, guys. But let's talk about the Wagner freakout. Now, the head of the Wagner Corporation group, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them, private military contractors out of Russia, they use these guys because there's less legal liability, I guess, when you get mercenaries to do stuff. You can get away with a lot more. And so this guy right here that you're seeing talking, he had a freak out. He's accusing the Russian government of not providing enough weapons to his troops. He is currently in Bakhmut, the hottest of the hot in Ukraine right now, on the front lines, in the reddest of all places, on the front lines. Imagine that. One of the highest military commanders, not in the Russian military, because technically he's outside the military, but one of the highest in terms of the chain of command, in terms of power and influence within the society. The head of the Wagner organization is very, very high up there, okay? Now, this guy is on the front lines in Bakhmut, and he's trying to tell you that they are running out of weapons, that they don't have enough bullets. Why on earth would you have such a high-ranking person on the front lines? And I know people are going to say the Russians always put their commanders on the front lines. The king leads from the front, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to put a guy of this rank in harm's way like that. He is literally right on the fringes of the fight, okay? Not even in the safe part of Bakhmut, the part where they're loading the bodies, okay? And he's freaking out on camera. He's cursing out Sergei Shoigu and Gerasimov, which are like the two highest ranking guys in the Russian military. And Shoigu fires back today saying, what are you talking about? You got lots of ammo. So clearly there's some sort of animosity between the two. Perhaps Putin is keeping them at odds so that he can maintain control over people. He keeps various generals to scare other generals to make sure that one doesn't try to foment a coup or something like that. I don't know what it is, but ask yourself this question. Why would this guy, and this is why people think that this is a ruse, okay? That this so-called floundering of their military and this threaten to rout from Bakhmut is all contrived, and that Prigozhin is just a really good actor. It may well be the case, because if the situation was as dire as they say, I highly doubt this guy would be at the front lines for as long as he has been, okay? So I would just, I'm really open to hearing what your thoughts are on this. If you've been keeping pace with this whole thing, you might have some thoughts on what exactly is going on with this whole theatric. Now, part of me would think that maybe they were having too much of a good time grinding down the meat in Bakhmut. They've taken Bakhmut. The Russians have 95% of Bakhmut under their control. It's just a few city blocks that they have left. They've almost closed the cauldron, as it's called, and the pincers are, closing in. And so maybe they're concerned that the Ukrainians aren't going to keep throwing more meat into the grinder, and that this is a way to maybe bait the Ukrainians to throw more into the fight, knowing that they're just going to be annihilated by artillery, by Russian artillery. Now, supposedly, the Ukrainians have matched the Wagner in their artillery bombardments, and that's why there's been a bit of a stalemate here established. And the theory about that is that they're trying to keep the fight in Bakhmut going long enough until the counteroffensive starts. That's when they're probably going to fold in Bakhmut. But they don't want to do it until then because they want to maintain public and Western support and hope for the conflict. Okay, that's the prevailing theory. Anyways, you guys let me know what you think. What the hell do I know about anything? Yeah, so this is Bakhmut, right? This is what's going on there. You got 90% of the city is in red. It's all taken. They've been moving this way. They've been kind of closing around, and they've been closing the cauldron. And now they got a few more city blocks. And then what they do? Then they'd be bored. So right now they're screaming about the lack of ammunition. And a lot of people think it's just a ruse. Let's go to the map and see what is going on today. The Chechens have said, Kadyrov comes out and he says, okay, if you want to leave, I'll come there. Remember Kadyrov? So you got Kadyrov, you got the Chechen guy, you got the Wagner guy, you got Gerasimov, you got Shoigu, you got all these big generals, military men up top, and they're all kind of at odds. They're all kind of kept fighting over scraps almost. It's like Putin has a master Machiavellian plan to ensure that one guy doesn't establish too much power, if you know what I'm saying, or he can always use a couple other guys if some other guy tries to threaten a coup, if you know what I mean. I think there's some 4D chess going on there, but I could mistake. And what the hell do I know anyways? 10,000 drone pilots are getting ready for this Ukrainian counteroffensive. 10,000 drone pilots. Now, of course, we're talking about the DJI drones where they drop the grenade. But, I mean, you do that thousands and thousands of times. That's pretty effective on the battlefield. The Russians have been trying to master counter-drone technology. Now, I don't know much about how high these drones are flying. I'm presuming, based on some of the footage that I've seen, that it's not too far in the air, that you couldn't blow these things out of the sky with some number 4 birdshot. But what do I know? Okay, maybe you just got to start arming your soldiers with a shotgun as well, or just have a shotgun in every trench or something like that, and like a drone gun, basically, to take it out, or a bigger caliber shotgun that just had the right amount of spread and the right amount of range to blow these things out of the sky. That would be the way to do it. But they got 10,000 drones at the ready. Hopefully they can counter Russia's 900 active warplanes and 150 bombers that they can mobilize at any minute. We have a crackdown in Ukraine, okay? The media crackdown. You got to control the narrative before the big offensive starts. Now, this is the exact same thing that happened last summer. Gonzalo Lira, Coach Red Pill, if you guys have never seen that guy on YouTube, very controversial figure. Anyways, Gonzalo Lira disappeared. He's a Chilean journalist. And they took him last year. People thought that he got roughed up and that some people even thought he got killed at the time. And then he came back on the scene. They said that you can stay, we're going to put you on house arrest, or you got to stay in the country. You couldn't leave the country, that was it. And if you do try to leave the country, then yeah, you're going back to jail. So they got him again. And this is a sign that the narrative is, they're trying to control the narrative. I think this is very similar to what happened with Tucker Carlson. The United States knows, Rupert Murdoch knows people in the highest of high. You don't get that high. You don't get allowed to be in that influential position without, people in high places telling you what the limits are and the restrictions are and what you can say. And so Tucker Carlson may have been too anti-war for their liking, knowing that this counteroffensive was going to get very bloody this summer. And it's going to get a hell of bloody, guys, because you got to think about this. There's going to be so much military activity when this counteroffensive begins that something is going to go awry. There's going to be a missile that lands in another country. There's going to be a drone that gets shot down, an American drone. There's going to be some civilian airplane that gets offed, mistakenly thinking that it's a warplane. Shit's going to hit the fan. And that means that we're going to be very prone to having accidents happen. The Russians now have basically openly stated that they're at war with NATO and the United States. That they believe that they have proof, in fact, that the United States, and we're talking about Lavrov, we're talking about Peskov, there's another guy, Maria Zakharova, they all claim that this Kremlin attack was orchestrated in Washington. That's the final red line. There's no other red lines except that. Even if it was done by Russian defectors, by Russian partisans, as they're called, they would think that it was the Americans who were the ones who were funding that type of operation. Now, again, like I said in yesterday's video, just because something is American-inspired, American influence, doesn't mean it always comes from the top down. There's many degrees of separation between Joe Biden and covert ops guys who, you know, maybe hire something out to some mercenaries or hitmen or whatever the case might be, or just some guy in a village somewhere and they pay him to go and fly this drone. I mean, there's so many ways that you can distance yourself and maintain that plausible deniability, that nice cushion to insulate you from any possible legal reprisals or tracing it directly back to Washington. But the Russians aren't stupid. They are saying that this is not a false flag. They're downplaying those accusations. So anyways, we know that we're in a state of war. And what I'm saying is it could start this weekend. It could probably be already started right now. In fact, the Wagner head says that it is already started. I think what he means by that is that they're starting to test for weaknesses, okay? Because they want to see where the easiest place to break through is going to be and start whatever sort of blitzkrieg maneuver with German Leopard tanks, World War II all over again, where the best place is going to be to start that out. Now, what else do we got going on here? Scorched earth in Bakhmut. What's going on in Bakhmut? These are some images of incendiary munitions being used in Bakhmut. And this looks like CGI. It looks like something out of a movie. It looks like a forest fire, some kind of sci-fi flick. But this is what it looks like in Bakhmut. I mean, Bakhmut is just scorched earth right now. I don't know how the hell people are surviving there. Apparently, there's a lot of underground tunnels. And apparently what the Ukrainians are using is the nuclear bunkers that were built there in the Soviet era to hide. And that's why it's been such a challenging fight. So you see, the Russians are fighting themselves. They're fighting their own missile defense. They're fighting their own weapons. And they're fighting their own fortifications that they laid down 20, 30 years ago. And everybody keeps saying they're stupid when, you know, they're fighting themselves. It'd be like if we were fighting ourselves. All right, what else do we got going on here? New military chief of staff is inbound. He was actually appointed by Trump. We're going to talk about what that might mean for the future of the U.S. military in various conflicts. We have Rogozin, who insists that they must use nuclear weapons. He's talking about the Russians. He thinks that the only way to win is to utilize tactical nuclear weapons. He's calling them the great equalizer. I've always thought of nukes as being like the Second Amendment of the planet. That's why I can appreciate North Korea's desire to have nuclear weapons. I mean, it's like, you know, it's gun control. Like nuclear arms control is really the guns control of the planet. Because it's the only thing that a little defenseless country, just like a little old lady, you know, she can't fight off a guy who's 7 feet tall, 350 pounds, but she can have a gun, right? And if you're a little country and you can have a nuclear weapon, it's the perfect metaphor. It's the same analogy. So it's the great equalizer, as they say. Russia is in the North Sea with a bunch of ships, and that's not good because there's live fire exercises going on with NATO right now in that same region. They are concerned that the Russians might be sabotaging undersea cables, undersea critical infrastructure, offshore infrastructure, and that that's the next level of hybrid warfare that they're about to engage in. And of course, there's this whole coronation of the, what do they call it? The not the aristocracy, the monarchy, King Charles, whatever his face is. And people are going to say, you're disrespecting the king. I don't care. Okay, I quite frankly do not care. I have no allegiance to anybody but myself. If you don't like it, then I guess you can go and unsubscribe from the channel, all right? I'm sick and tired of having to kiss somebody's ass. I pay the taxes that I pay, and that's all I need to do, all right? Anyways, sorry about the rant, guys. Look, I still got my gun glasses on from the gun range. You know, you got to be out there prepping right now. You got to pair all of this doom and gloom stuff with actionable action. Okay, you got to be, and that's why this weekend we're going out into the garden. I got to do some rototilling. It's going to be sweaty. It's going to be nasty, but we got to get it done. And the weather is going to be permitting, so you just got to keep doing stuff. And we're going to be releasing a variety of videos in the next few days. We're talking about home fortifications. We are talking about gardening, and we are also going to be talking about a revolutionary new service for preppers. This is going to change the game. Nothing like this has ever been done before. Mark my words. So you got to come back here on Sunday, okay? Now, we have Lavrov saying that they are going to take action soon, that they don't need to explain casus belli. They don't believe all the brouhaha about how this is a false flag operation, that they're not going to telegraph what they're going to do. They're just going to execute when they feel the time is right. And that's one of the things that I just don't think the Russians are. It's not that I don't think they could pull off a false flag operation. They're too transparent. You know, I mean, everybody is always trying to look for the deeper underlying meaning of what they're trying to do, whether this is a ruse or that. But I think they're really, what you see is what you get. And I don't know if they really would go to the lengths to pull something off like that. I don't think the juice would be worth the squeeze. Mass evacuations underway, as I've talked about, and if you didn't know, stock up before the panic, because we are just one incident away from people freaking the hell out and panic buying like never before, guys, okay? All right, here we go. Here we go. What do we got going on in the world? I think I pretty much already talked about. I could just end the video there. I mean, this is all stuff I've already talked about, basically. Yeah, so the nuclear power plant thing, the Russians are also warning about the risks of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant flooding. And the reason why this is so important, I mean, if the nuclear power plant, if something happens there, it's not going to affect the United States. It's going to affect the war, but it's going to create panic everywhere if and when it happens. And the reason why I think something is going to happen there is, number one, this is where the front line is, okay? So this is where they're thinking that the major offensive is going to come from. And you can see why the Ukrainians would want it back. It's the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. So they suspect that, and this is the parts that are starting to be evacuated, they suspect the offensive is going to come here. It can't come anywhere west of there because it's all river. And every time the Ukrainians try to come over the river, they get blown to smithereens. So they have to come down here. So they're testing the fences here in order to establish where exactly they're going to try to break through. And the problem with that is that right over here is this big, massive nuclear power plant. And that means that this is going to be a target. See, as up until now, the shelling has come from over the river, I do believe. Don't quote me on that. But that's where, you know, a lot of the crossfire has happened. Now, the Russians, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, have moved explosive and fighting positions in and around the nuclear power plant. So they're anticipating that eventually the fight is going to come to them if the Ukrainians are able to make headway. And maybe that's what the Ukrainians want to do. Maybe that's the only hope they really have, is to try to break around here, take the nuclear power plant back, maybe force some kind of ceasefire at some point. Maybe that's going to be how this thing ends, with an isolated nuclear incident instead of the actual detonation of a nuclear weapon. If this happens, it could be a mixed blessing, in the sense that it will suck for the people in the region and in and around Europe if there is a radiological event that in some ways gets in the jet stream or gets in the air and blows here and there and everywhere. But it may be what puts the brakes on the war if there's a radiological incident, because you're not going to be able to fight around there. You won't be able to send guys around there. So, it's just it'll be an international emergency, and the IAEA will get involved, and the UN will get involved, and even that's when probably China and all these other people who've been relatively neutral are going to say, hey, we got it, and even the United States at that point. So you just never know what's going to happen. But the Ukrainians, the pressure is on for them to make a move here, okay? So this is where they're likely going to try to make a move, because the thinking is there's only one bridge that connects Crimea over here. That's not to say they can't boat stuff over, they can't fly stuff over. Currently, they have this land bridge, so they can bring all kinds of supplies down here. But if the Ukrainians can get down here, cut it off, backfill it, and then fight back that way, I doubt they're ever going to take this. The people there are way too hardened. I think this is a foregone conclusion that they're not going to get that. But they're still fighting there, because apparently they might try to make some progress here as well in Donetsk. But just imagine how bloody that battle would be. I mean, that's a much bigger city. Look at the size of this city, Donetsk, compared to Bakhmut. Compared to little old Bakhmut. Where is Bakhmut? Right here. This a little tiny city compared to this massive city. Okay, I don't know, it's like 500,000 people or something like that. It's a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, that would be just a catastrophic battle if that actually ensued. So let's hope it doesn't go there. What else do we got going on here? Wagner fighters to hand over positions on May 10th, they claim. The day after Victory Day. Are they actually going to do it, or is it just a ruse? Only time will tell, I guess. But as I said, they're thinking that there's a counteroffensive coming in just a few hours. According to the governor Evgeny Belitsky of Zaporozhye region, and that's why they're relocating local residents deeper into the region. It's important to remember that these 4 territories, that Russia still considers this part where the Ukrainians are as Russia. Okay, these annexed territories extend deeper, and Russia still considers that Russian territory that Ukrainians are on. So if they are going to follow through with their promise to liberate, or I guess from their perspective, liberate the annexed territories, the Ukrainians view it in the opposite direction, then they have a lot of ground to cover. Okay, and that means that, we're talking about a counteroffensive with the Ukrainians on the initiative. It's going to be a long time, I think, before that happens, but you just never know. Okay, this is Kadyrov talking about how, he's trying to prove himself, right, to Putin. They're all trying to prove themselves, it seems. They're all trying to vie for political power. Russia is a country of 160 million people. They have the most resources in the world, and they virtually have very, very little debt. And so, I mean, if they can get their crap together, they would be an economic powerhouse, to say the least. This kind of stuff has been going on all over the place. This was I can't remember what it was, some kind of meeting, Ukrainian delegation, parliamentary assembly of the Black Sea Economic Corporation. Some guys freaking out, protesters. This kind of stuff has been happening with all sorts of political dignitaries getting sabotaged and crashed, had the party crashed. Lots of fistfights ensuing. So tensions are rising. They're reaching a boiling point. And it's only a matter of time before it spills over into the rest of the world. What else do we got going on? Did I cover everything, or should I keep on rambling? I think I covered that. This is the SBU's message about Gonzalo Lira. SBU detented a foreign agent blogger in Kharkiv who denied racist crimes, insulted Ukraine defenders. They're calling them racist crimes. That's interesting. So they're saying that the Russians were racist against the Ukrainians. Interesting. Denied the crime of rashists. Is that a Russian word? I don't know. Maybe they just made a typo. It's hard to say. It's so informal there right now. Anyways, they give this big, long explanation as to why they're arresting him. They don't really provide, because there really is no, I don't think there's really any charge here. I don't think he's technically done anything that he can be prosecuted for. But they do say suspicion under Article 2 and 3, 436-2 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, production and distribution of materials containing justification, armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, committed repeatedly. Whatever that means. But I think it's a sign that democracy is flourishing in Ukraine. I think it's great. I think everybody should move there and live to be free and say whatever you want against whoever you want. It's a bastion of free speech, man. Maybe Tucker can get a job there. I highly doubt that. Did I talk about this? Dmitry Rogozhin, look at this murder mystery wall. Russia needs to use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. He's on the front line, this guy right here. Okay, he's the former chief of the Russian space program. This is the guy who built the nukes. And he's saying, the best method to destroy Ukraine's counteroffensive is to use tactical nuclear weapons. You know, do you guys think the Russians are going to use nukes? I mean, do you really think they're going to do it? The question is where, right? Now, and here's the reason why they might use nukes. If they really are running out of ammo like the West says they are, then we should be more concerned that when they're sitting on thousands of perfectly usable tactical nuclear weapons, it becomes the economical choice to use one, okay? So all of the alacrity over the Russians running out of ammunition, I think would meet its end very quick when they start dropping nukes instead, because that's all they have left. And that's always been my concern, is that when they run out of conventional, they have no other choice but to go unconventional. The Russians are also threatening the Finns because the Americans are going to be putting in military bases there. We got some stuff going on in the North Sea, okay? So we got all kinds of Russian warships heading out to the North Sea. In the North Sea right now, and NATO is launching live-fire missile drills as Putin nuke armada stalks the UK in the highest Russian naval activity in 3 years. And probably the highest Cold War, nuclear war tension in 40 years. As we talked about, Russia's debt compared to Western debt. Putin has compared the two. I did a video last year comparing these two things. And Russia owes very little, 15% debt to GDP ratio compared to our 120%. And considering that our actual GDP is around 30 trillion, that means that we owe, what, 35, 40 trillion dollars now, something like that. Whereas the Russians maybe owe a few hundred billion. So that's something you have to factor into wealth. And many people would argue, many economic purists would argue that GDP isn't even really a good measure of the wealth of a nation. You know, what matters is the resources you have in the ground, the manpower you have at your disposal, the manufacturing your base, your ability to build stuff, not your ability to write code per se. Well, maybe you can make the argument for that, but the service-based, consumer-driven economy, all you're doing is consuming stuff. You know, if the chips were to fall where they may, we would have no factories. We would have no supply chain. We would be SOL, and all of our big box stores would be totally empty. So that's the point that I think he's trying to make. I'm not sure. I'm not really up to speed on the bank thing. I know that gold broke a new record temporarily the other day. I believe it went up to 276 or 279 or something like that, and then it came back down. And this is the guy that Trump appointed, apparently. Senator General Charles Brown. Don't know much about him. I know he's got some decorations. I don't know if he's ever, I mean, nobody except the Russians and Ukrainians now have seen high-intensity conflict. There's people who are Vietnam War vets, you know, Iraqi war vets, Afghanistan, and yes, that stands for something, but it's a little different when you're fighting tank battles and, you know, fighting artillery battles and stuff like that. Regardless, we'll see. We'll see what the outcome is there. I guess we're going to really see, because this guy is a Trump appointee, so that's something to remember. Now, obviously, he's at the behest of whoever is the president at the point in time. And the whole point of the military is you are there to act on the behest of the president for the most part. I mean, there's some discretion in there, but it's supposed to be an apolitical institution. So this guy is going to do, I guess, whatever they say he's going to do, but just remember who appointed him is all I'm saying. So, and I think it's just going to be more evidence that it doesn't matter who's put in power, it transcends that level, that, you know, the economic interests of maintaining U.S. dollar hegemony in the military-industrial complex, you know, everybody's in on that racket. So it doesn't matter who you are. It's, you know, I mean, Trump did a lot of things that were very provocative with the Soleimani thing with the Iranians and all the rest. And now the Israelis are like, oh no, the Iranians are going to build 5 nuclear bombs. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, that's life. Get used to it. Get used to it or prepare for nuclear Armageddon, I guess. That's about all I got to talk about today, guys. We got a litany of very, very high production videos we've been working on for a while. We got one on home fortifications, we got one on gardening, and we got one on medicine. The game-changing video I've been waiting for to share with you guys. It's about to be released this Sunday, so stay tuned. Stay tuned to the, not the TV set, but I'm going to try to maybe come back and do one more doom and gloom update this weekend, but I got a lot of work to do in the garden. Just got to get ready and make sure you get out to the gun range. Make sure you work on your physical fitness. Make sure you're eating right. Make sure you're making the most out of the grid while it's still here. Like I say, the 100-to-1 rule, it's 100 times easier to do things now than it is when the grid goes down. In fact, a very well-known physicist challenged me on this recently, and he says it's more like 1,000 times easier to do things. And I would have to agree, because I'm pretty sure a tractor with a tank full of gas could probably do more work than I can ever do in a lifetime. So, something to think about, guys. Go in and get it while the getting is good. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Barber out.